welcome to the channel. I'm back to break down my top running back plays for this Week 10 NFL DFS slate on DraftKings. Before we get into it, if you could please just leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel. I greatly appreciate that. It's going to help me grow, and in return, I'm going to be breaking down these positional best plays on a weekly basis for you guys. Started with the QB position yesterday. We're going to start breaking down the running back and the wide receiver today for you guys. So leave a like, hit the subscribe button, and let's start breaking down my top plays for this week's slate. So the very first option is that in Aaron Jones taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Green Bay Packers come into this game as heavy favorites so far. The Vegas total, as we had gone over in the QB video, looking real high. They opened at a 33.75 implied run total. It's dropped down to a 31.75 live line since then. But I mean, you still gotta love the spot for Aaron Jones, a guy that gets a ton of workload. Right now, I have him projected for 18 carries, over 80 yards, and around 19 DK points. And I mean, I think further on in the week, I could see my projections like him even more because I mean, with how heavily favorited they are and the targets that this guy gets, I think he's just a great option. If you look at his game logs, you can see, the targets they're there, the rushing attempts are there. I mean, just all around, diverse back. Last week having 5 targets, 5 receptions, and then to go along with all of the yards he picked up on the ground. Definitely like Aaron Jones in this spot as a heavy favorite. So he is my first option to like this week at the running back position. Next on the list is Alvin Kamara, who actually gets a tough matchup. I mean, when looking at my matchup chart for running backs, Alvin Kamara gets to take on the Niners, who are the second worst team to target for running backs, unfortunately. So while we do like to play Alvin Kamara every week, and I do think he's going to be a contrarian play this week because the matchup's not there. So, or the matchup, it's a bad matchup. So the ownership's probably going to drop again for him in this spot. So he's a guy that we usually target every single time, he takes the field because of just the elite usage he has. And when looking at his game logs, we can see that he has, on average, he had 6 targets. Last week, the week before, 13 targets. Week 7, 8 targets. He gets a ton of targets. Leads the league in targets at the running back position. If I go over to my target sheet for running backs, we can see that Alvin Kamara is number 1 in the league with 72 targets so far on the year. And he's just a no-brainer every time he's out there, except for the fact of the matchup. As I had mentioned, the matchup's not great. And then when you're looking at my play calling pace chart for these New Orleans Saints, you can see that on average they do run quite a few plays, running about 66 plays per game, which is great. But I mean, that's where the appeal kind of stops. He's got the workload. He's got he's in an offense that they're running a ton of plays a game, but he's in a really tough matchup. So I have to mention Alvin Kamara as a tournament play because the workload's always going to be there, and maybe with the tough matchup, we're going to see some lower ownership on him than we typically would. So I do like him as a tournament play. Next on the list is Antonio Gibson, a guy that's questionable tag. I think he had a shoulder injury earlier on in the week in practice. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But practice in full on Thursday, it's looking like. So, I mean, I don't think there's anything to be worried about with Antonio Gibson. He's a guy that I'm definitely going to have interest in the matchup today, taking on the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions have been our favorite team to target all year long on the ground. They're the number 1 team to target on my matchup chart against running backs. They give up about 34.5 DK points a game to running backs, 276.2 DK points total so far through 8 games, 5 TDs. I mean, pretty much rank at the bottom of the barrel and everything. And that's 5 TDs in the receiving department and then 10 TDs on the ground. So you'd like to target these Lions. And I do think that Gibson's a viable target. And then when you look at the Washington football team's play call tendencies, they do, unfortunately, have a tendency to pass the ball a lot more, but I think that's kind of correlated with the fact that they've been down in a lot of football games. And when we're looking at the Vegas lines in this one, it's going to be a closer game. The Lions are only favored by 3.5 points, so I don't think that the Washington football team is going to be blown out in this one, and I do think that Antonio Gibson can pick up a fair share of carries. And I do like him grading out to score about 17 DK points in my projections. Duke Johnson, the next guy I'm going to have interest in for Houston. It's looking like a concussion is going to keep David Johnson out of this game this week. So that's going to immediately slot him into a heavier role. which we like to see against this Cleveland Browns team. I mean, David Johnson not practicing Thursday. He's expected to miss Sunday's game, so it does look like a lock for him to be out. So that's going to open up some salary for us as far as playing Duke Johnson. Takes on the Cleveland Browns. When looking at my matchup chart for running backs, you can see that the Cleveland Browns are the 19th best team to target. I mean, not the best matchup, but definitely not going to hurt us any. And specifically when looking at receiving, they have given up a fair amount of receiving stats to running backs, which I think increases the appeal for Duke Johnson because, while Duke Johnson isn't exactly the lead back in this field or in this backfield, he has seen quite a few receptions. When going over to my play calling pace chart, we can see that when going over to the Texans, there's a lot of pass attempts, and specifically when looking at my target sheet, I mean, Duke Johnson rates number 44 in the league in targets out of the backfield, which you would think, that's not that great, but he's not in a feature role, and the fact that he's in the top 50, I think, says something. And he's going to be in a feature role this week, taking on this Cleveland Browns team. I do think that we can have a lot of interest in Duke Johnson, and then when you mention his salary over here on DraftKings, you can see that he's only 5K. So all of these things blended together, it's looking real good for Duke Johnson in this one. Baking in the salary, baking in the fact that the competition that he usually has with David Johnson as far as getting touches is eliminated. Definitely a guy that I'm going to have interest in this week. And then when looking at the Vegas totals for that game, we can see that the Houston Texans are expected to, if we can find them here, one moment. As far as the line's concerned, it's expected to be a close game. So Duke Johnson's going to be heavily involved throughout this one, regardless, I think. I mean, it's not a heavy favorite, and there are some wins in this game, as I discussed in my QB video, that we need to keep an eye on leading up to Sunday, because if it's going to be real windy to the point where it's going to be affecting quarterbacks and their ability to throw the football, I think there's going to be a lot of checkdowns, there's going to be a lot of runs, there's going to be a lot of good stuff for a guy like Duke Johnson at a good salary. Next on the list is James Conner taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. When looking at my matchup chart for QBs, the Bengals are the 16th best team to target for running backs, giving up a ton of yards on the ground, 993 yards given up so far in the year through 8 games. The receptions given up aren't quite as great, except, it's not like James Conner is a guy that we target for his pass catching ability. He's more of a ground and pound type of running back. And specifically when looking at the Steelers' play calling this year, they have ran about 27 times a game, and I think that all bodes well for James Conner in this spot at a 6.9K price tag on DraftKings. You can see, last week didn't really perform well against Dallas, unfortunately, was very underwhelming. However, he has performed pretty well in some tougher matchups like the Baltimore Ravens, and it's not like the Browns are a defense that we're really all too worried about. So I do like James Conner. Projects for about 17.5 DK points. And then 3 more guys that I have interested in. James Robinson taking on the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers have been very, very bad against the run this year. They're the second best team to target in terms of the run, meaning they're the second worst team against the run. Absolutely terrible. They've given up 11 rushing touchdowns, 4 receiving touchdowns. I mean, they pretty much... It's green across the board, and this is green in the sense of wanting to target them on my matchup chart, my running back matchup chart. So I really do like, me some James Robinson in this spot. His usage has been pretty high. It's not like he's had a really big breakout game as of late, but I think this could be the spot because, he did have a 34.7 spot against the Chargers, so maybe I misspoke there, but I think we're waiting for another explosion game similar to that, and I think this could be the spot. Taking on the Packers, it's a great matchup. He's going to get the touches. Right now on my projections, he grades out to get about 20 touches, which actually leads all of the guys that I'm talking about. Well, it's tied with James Conner. So I definitely like James Robinson in this spot. He's a guy to definitely have interest in. Mike Davis is a guy that's going to immediately pop to the top of lists in projections this week because of the fact that Christian McCaffrey, CMC, is projected to be out at a 9K price tag. A guy that's typically an elite play. Looks like he wasn't going to play. However, looking at the updates, this is the stuff we have to keep an eye on. Looks like he has a realistic chance to play in Week 11 following a second opinion. So, Mike Davis, a guy, as we're breaking this down together, McCaffrey has a doubtful. He is ruled doubtful. However, it's looking like that status may have just changed. So Mike Davis, a guy that was minimum salary, and we were going to have a ton of interest in her at 4K. Maybe a guy that we aren't playing this week. However, if Christian McCaffrey's limited, which I don't think they're going to play him if he's limited, but if he is limited, for some reason we get that announcement, and Mike Davis automatically becomes a play like he was going to be. Something to keep an eye on there. That's interesting. That news must have just broke as I'm recording. Miles Sanders taking on the New York Giants is the last running back that I'll have interest in this week. Looking at my matchup chart, the G-men as far as running backs are concerned, the 9th best team to target in the league, and they've given up a lot of reception, good stats as far as receiving to running backs. When looking at Miles Sanders' game log, you can see, hasn't really done anything too great. I mean, you have that 23 spot against Pittsburgh, that was good, but overall he's just been pretty consistent. But he's receiving a few targets a game, a few receptions, and then as far as attempts is concerned, he's been right in the 10 attempts per game range. So at 6'4" on DraftKings, he's a guy that might go a little bit under-owned and does definitely have the upside, because when looking at his matchup against the Giants, top 10 team to target as far as wanting to play running backs against them. And then when we're looking at the Eagles play calling overall this year on my play calling pace chart, you can see that they haven't really ran the ball a ton. So that would be the only thing that's kind of a red flag for me for playing Sanders. However, I do think that he can get some work in the pass, enough to make him viable. And it's really an ownership play in tournaments. I don't think he's going to get the ownership that he deserves this week. I think he's in a pretty decent spot to break out a big game. And then when we're breaking down the Vegas totals, I mean, the Eagles are favored in this game, not by a ton, 3 points, but projected to be kind of low scoring, kind of more of a grounded pound type of game, I think. And, Miles Sanders could definitely excel in that type of environment. So those are my top running back plays for this Week 10 NFL DFS slate on DraftKings. If you enjoyed the content, please hit the like button on this video. Most importantly, hit that subscribe button. It's really going to help me out. And then lastly, if you're interested in my Patreon packages that I just released, the link will be in the description, where you can get access to things like my projections, my matchup charts, my play calling pace charts, my cheat sheets, etc. Go ahead and check that out if interested. I appreciate you guys tuning in, and we will see you in the next video, where we're going to start breaking down wide receivers.